My name was Amir. I was a surgeon, revered in my community, a devoted Muslim dedicated to my craft and my faith. Proudly donning my white coat, I believed I held the keys to healing, standing under the weight of prayers and traditions etched deep into my being. But beneath that polished exterior lay a soul wrestling with shadows, a gnawing emptiness, whispering questions that echoed louder than any sermon I had heard. One fateful night in the operating room, under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, I slipped into a darkness that felt all too familiar. It wasn't the first time I felt lost, but this time it was different. This time, I ventured beyond the veil of life. In that ethereal space, I was met by a presence that shattered the chains of everything I had ever known. Jesus. He called my name, not with condemnation, but with a grace that illuminated the deepest corners of my doubt. In that moment between life and death, I was shown the veiled truths, the limitations of the religion I clung to, the ways I had allowed fear to govern my heart. I was part of a spiritual war I couldn't even fathom, and I realized the path I had followed might not have led me to God, but rather to a system of control that masked the truth of love and redemption. Returning to my body felt like a treacherous descent back into a world I could no longer see the same way. The silence that followed was deafening. I was now perceived as a heretic by the very community that once celebrated me. Alone and in terror, I grappled with a newfound faith that bore no resemblance to the life I had lived. The duality of my existence became unbearable as I hid my revelations, yearning for connection, yet haunted by isolation. But I found refuge in the glow of a new light, a quiet community filled with those who had also risen from the ashes of tradition, seeking truth where the shadows once reigned. I began to explore the depths of the gospel, the whispers of a different kind of hope. Each page reverberated with freedom, calling out to the emptiness within me and promising that there was more to life than fear and ritual. Dear friends, this is not just my journey. It's a call to all who feel the weight of unseen chains. Join me as I unveil the truth that has transformed my life and sparked a revolution in my heart. But first, let me know where you are watching from. What time is it in your part of the world? Your voices matter in this unfolding narrative. And if you resonate with this journey of discovery, subscribe to Truth from Beyond. Together, let's explore what lies beyond the shadows and seek the transformative embrace of Christ's love. The revelation starts now. In the heart of Kuala Lumpur, the hospital bustled with life, a hub of hope and urgency wrapped in the delicate fabric of Islamic tradition. As a surgeon, I embraced the weight of responsibility each day, the very act of healing infused with reverence. Yet beneath the surface of professionalism, an internal storm brewed within me, a profound disquiet about my role in a society that often felt entangled in a web of expectations. Every patient I encountered reflected the strain of life's choices, and while I wore a mask of calm, I too was fighting my own spiritual war against the creeping shadows of doubt. It was during a particularly intense surgery, under the harsh fluorescent lights, that the world around me began to blur. Amidst the beeping monitors and the focused chatter of my colleagues, everything faded away as my hands guided the scalpel with precision. Suddenly, an overwhelming feeling washed over me, a sensation I could only describe as a divine presence enveloping me. In that moment, time seemed to suspend. It was then that I heard the voice, gentle yet thunderous, filled with authority and love. "You've been chosen," Jesus said, piercing through the chaos. "It's time for you to awaken." As he spoke, a cascade of revelations flooded my consciousness. I saw the hidden agendas driving our society, the elite manipulating the masses, peddling deception as truth while masquerading under the guise of progress. I began to understand how political leaders exploited fear to maintain control, perpetuating division among people and fueling conflicts for their gain. All around me, I could see those who struggled daily with the weight of expectations, caught in a cycle of suffering that stemmed from a profound misunderstanding of our shared humanity. Each life represented a soldier in this spiritual war, battling unseen forces determined to keep us ensnared in ignorance. The world outside, so vibrant and chaotic, could no longer distract me from the truths swirling in my heart. My surgical team continued their work, but in my mind's eye, I witnessed the larger tapestry of existence, woven with threads of hope, love, and connection. Jesus revealed to me that the soul's journey was not merely about individual belief systems. It was about the collective awakening of humanity. This wasn't just a personal transformation. It was a call to action, a chance to reclaim our shared narrative from those who sought to shatter it. The urgency of his message vibrated within my very being. What you choose to do will either help reveal the truth or further entrench the deception, he warned, as clarity washed over me. As I emerged from this transcendent experience, my heart raced not from the adrenaline of surgery, but from the weight of a mission I could no longer ignore. I looked around the operating room, once merely a place of healing, transformed into sacred ground filled with potential. Each patient was a testament to resilience, holding stories that craved to be heard, and it was now my duty to help awaken that spirit in them. I remembered my own struggles with faith, the walls that had kept me from recognizing the deeper humanity in everyone I encountered. The realization stung like a winter's chill, sobering yet invigorating, igniting a fire within me that demanded to be shared. But within that fervor loomed the specter of fear. How could I share these revelations without risking everything? My reputation, my standing in this deeply traditional society, hung precariously in the balance. I wrestled with the vision of my life changing forever. Yet I knew that my silence would ultimately betray those trapped in the grasp of deception. This journey wasn't just about me. It was about dismantling the barriers that divided us, about revealing the truth that lingered like a ghost in the shadows. As I closed my eyes again, the room spinning slightly from the weight of my new reality, I understood that my awakening was only the beginning. What awaited beyond the walls of this operating room was a world desperate for healing and truth, awaiting someone brave enough to guide them through the darkness. Every day, I put on my pristine lab coat, the fabric a symbol of professionalism and precision, as I step into the operating room. At 34, I've earned the respect of my peers as a skilled surgeon in a busy hospital in Malaysia. But beneath that well-groomed appearance, my soul bears the heavy weight of emotional fatigue. Day in and day out, I'm admired for my surgical skill, yet in my heart lies a void, a chasm of spiritual anguish that feels increasingly insurmountable. My family raised me to be devout, and I strive to obey our religious traditions, yet I can't shake the feeling that something is fundamentally amiss within me. It was during a particularly challenging surgery, when the stakes felt exceptionally high, that everything changed. As I delicately navigated through layers of flesh and tissue, my mind raced, juggling the weight of responsibility, the hum of medical equipment, and the anxious faces peering through the glass. Suddenly, I felt a profound surge of energy coursing through my veins, an otherworldly presence that made the sterile setting of the operating room fade into the background. I wasn't sure if it was fatigue or something far more significant, but in that moment, time ceased to exist. I found myself engulfed in an overwhelming encounter with Jesus. As his voice enveloped me, I realized this was not merely a whisper, but an urgent call for awakening. "You've been chosen," he said, and with those words, a rush of revelations cascaded through my mind. I witnessed threads of deception that had polluted our society, revealing the hidden agendas of the elite that manipulate our perception of reality. I was struck by the stark contrast between the sanctity of life that I fought to preserve in the operating room and the broader disturbing truths about how power brokers sow discord and division among us. Each revelation pierced through my confusion, urging me to look beyond the surface of my existence and confront the deeper implications of my faith. In that surreal moment, I also saw the battles waged not just on the streets but within the hearts of individuals. Like me, grappling with the relentless pressure to conform. I sensed the weight of societal expectations colliding with the innate yearning for spiritual truth. "This is your spiritual war," Jesus said, reinforcing the reality of my internal conflict. Every moment of doubt, every question I feared to voice became part of a much larger struggle. I grasped the urgency of my situation. Millions were caught in the cycle of manipulation, held hostage by fear and confusion, while I had been afforded a glimpse of the truth. As the surgery concluded, I emerged from that divine encounter forever altered. I looked around the operating room, my colleagues bustling about, yet I felt a detachment from the very reality I once embraced. The sterile instruments, the beeping monitors, all transformed into symbols representing a facade, life preserved yet layered in a deeper complexity that I could no longer ignore. It was then that I understood. My calling was to engage with that hidden truth. I felt a surge of responsibility to guide others, to awaken them to the deceptions that festered within our beliefs, to challenge the status quo, not just as a surgeon but as a messenger of hope and healing. Yet with this newfound purpose came the torrent of fear. How could I reconcile my revelations with my life as a respected doctor? I paused, the enormity of it all crashing over me like waves against a rocky shore. What would my colleagues say? How would my community react if I dared to speak about this spiritual awakening and the urgent truths I had witnessed? The prospect of confronting those questions filled me with dread. But deep down, I realized that this path was necessary, that silence would only further entrench the deception. As I stood amidst the quiet aftermath of the surgery, I felt the stirring call of destiny, urging me forward into the unknown. A journey to not only reclaim my own spirit, but to empower others to awaken from the slumber cast by a world lost in darkness. For years, I lived my life as a devoted Muslim, enveloped in the teachings of my faith, yet a growing emptiness gnawed at my spirit. As a 34-year-old surgeon, I put on a brave face every day, immersing myself in the intricacies of my work to avoid confronting the hollowness that echoed in my heart. While I guided so many towards health and healing, my own prayers started to feel increasingly superficial, and I questioned the very nature of the faith that had been my anchor for so long. Each plea to God felt like a whisper lost in the wind, my cries for clarity and purpose returning unanswered, deepening the sense of disillusionment. Lately, I found myself plagued by disturbing dreams, visions of chaos and confusion, mixed with the images of faces that I couldn't quite place. These dreams tugged at my subconscious, resurfacing feelings of doubt I had long buried. I began to feel a growing distrust in the religious system surrounding me. The very rituals and practices that once comforted me no longer seemed relevant or sound. I felt the weight of spiritual pressure around me. The expectations of my community and the lofty ideals of my faith started feeling like chains rather than guidance. It all culminated in a spiritual crisis that felt as real as the blood I spilled in the operating room, making it impossible to ignore any longer. Then, one fateful evening in the midst of my deepening turmoil, something extraordinary happened during a routine surgery. As I leaned over my patient, preparing for the delicate incision, I suddenly felt a jolt coursing through me, a surge of energy that momentarily pulled my consciousness from the sterile environment of the operating room. The sounds of machines faded away, and in that surreal moment, I was enveloped in a light so bright and pure that it ignited an awakening in my very soul. I found myself face to face with Jesus, his presence radiating love and understanding that penetrated the core of my being. Amir, he said, calling my name in a voice that resonated through the very depths of my spirit. It is time for you to awaken to the truth. In that moment, revelations began to flood my mind, unearthing layers of understanding I had never dared to explore. I began to see the hidden agendas behind the structures that governed our lives, the elite pulling strings from behind the scenes, crafting a deception that kept many in the dark. The world I inhabited was intertwined in a spiritual war that transcended religious divides, the manipulation of our hearts and minds to maintain control over our choices, our thoughts, our very essence. As he spoke, the visions expanded, revealing the connections between political leaders, societal divisions, and the global crises we faced. I witnessed how the elite benefited from our suffering, using their power to perpetuate conflict and chaos. Wars weren't just fought on battlefields, they raged within our very souls, stifling our ability to love and unify. Jesus urged me to take a stand, to reject the lies that kept people trapped in ignorance and fear. You are called to be a light in the darkness, he implored, igniting a fierce sense of purpose within me. The realization that my own suffering had tied into a larger narrative filled me with an urgency I had never felt before, pushing me to take action. As I blinked back into focus, the bright lights of the operating room flooded my vision once more, and the reality of my life crashed back around me. Yet I was, irrevocably changed. I returned to my work with a new lens, fueled by the revelations I had been gifted. Yet amidst this transformation, I felt the weight of fear settle in. How could I relay this truth without losing everything? How could I confront the societal structures that nurtured deception and perpetuated spiritual stagnation? The fear of that next step, of plunging into the unknown, armed only with the truth, loomed dangerously overhead. But I knew one thing for certain. My journey had only just begun, and the call for awakening echoed louder than the silence of my past. What lay ahead remained a mystery, but I was resolute. It was time to step into the light. As I stood in the operating room, the ambient sounds of the hospital faded into the background, replaced by a meditative silence that enveloped my being. With precision, I navigated the intricacies of the surgery before me, my focus entirely on saving this life. However, an unexpected rush of darkness loomed, like an impending storm that threatened to engulf everything. In the blink of an eye, the bright lights above began to dim, and I felt the ground fall away from beneath me, as if I were slipping into another realm altogether. Suddenly, I was no longer in the operating room but suspended in a vast expanse of ethereal light. In that otherworldly space, I felt weightless, liberated from the burdens that had long held me captive. It was there that I saw him, Jesus, radiating warmth and compassion that penetrated the depths of my soul. "Amir," he called, and with that single utterance my heart trembled. Every doubt that had plagued me for years faded into insignificance as I was drawn into the overwhelming embrace of his presence. It was a moment of transcendent clarity, a revelation that stripped away the complexities of life, revealing the essential truths that lay beneath the surface. As I stood there, surrounded by pure light, I began to understand the hidden agendas that had permeated my understanding of spirituality. I witnessed the deception embedded within religious systems, how they sometimes led us further from the truth rather than closer to it. I saw the elite manipulating faith for their own gain, using our beliefs to control and divide us while they prospered in the shadows. In that moment of divine insight, I recognized the spiritual war being waged all around us, a battle for our hearts and minds that relied on fear and ignorance. Jesus implored me, urging me to recognize that true spirituality was not found in the rigid structures laid out by man, but in the personal and profound connection we could cultivate with the divine. Every flash of understanding, felt like a call to action. My mind expanded as I grasped how the very conflicts that plagued our world, wars, divisions, suffering, were nurtured by a system that thrived on chaos and separation. I was struck by an urgency to share what I had seen, to awaken others caught in the grips of deception. These weren't just abstract concepts. I understood that individuals were suffering immensely, held hostage by the fear of questioning what they had always been taught. The truth I experienced painted a stark contrast to the narratives pushed by those in power. And within that contrast lay an invitation to awaken, to reclaim the narrative that had been stolen from us. Just as quickly as this enlightening experience began, I felt the pull back toward my body, a tether as palpable as the sensations of blood and breath. The operating room materialized around me once more, the monitors beeping urgently, but I was forever changed. As I returned to my role as a surgeon, I could no longer ignore the zeal erupting within me. The surgery was no longer just a procedure. It became a sacred duty, a chance to embody the truth I had just encountered, and to approach every patient with the love and compassion that Jesus had shown me. The memories of that encounter echoed in my mind, but alongside them lingered a sobering reality. I could hardly share these revelations without risking everything I had built. Fear gnawed at the edges of my courage. What would my colleagues, my community say? The thought of facing condemnation for daring to question long-held doctrines loomed large. Yet, deep down, I recognized that remaining silent was a betrayal of all I had experienced. I was caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, a burdensome need to safeguard my inner truth while feeling an undeniable urge to lift the veil of deception that clouded the hearts of so many. That moment was the genesis of my journey, confronting the shadows, fighting for the light, and embracing the truth that demanded to be shared with a world on the brink of awakening. What lay ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty, but there was a fire ignited within me that could no longer be contained. After my encounter with Jesus, returning to my life felt like stepping into a shadowy realm, one where I no longer fit. The sterile halls of the hospital, once a sanctuary where I healed others, now felt cold and unwelcoming. Whenever I entered the operating room, I was reminded of the profound truth I had experienced, the revelations flooding my mind. Yet I found myself suffocating beneath the weight of expectation. I longed to share what I had seen, to unveil the hidden agendas of the elite, to expose the deceptions that held so many captive. But I faced a harsh reality. Family and colleagues began to view me differently. The whispers followed me, a haunting symphony of disbelief and suspicion. Heretic, they called me, and the sting of that label cut deeper than any surgical knife. Every judgmental glance felt like a dagger aimed at my heart. I could hear my family's hushed conversations, the whispers of concern as they expressed their fears about my supposed fall from grace. I had dedicated my life to a path that was now being scrutinized, and it pained me to realize that the very people I loved were distancing themselves from me. The loneliness wrapped around me like a heavy cloak, exacerbating an internal battle that had grown fiercer since my revelation. I grappled with the chasm between my old self, an obedient servant of my faith, and the man awakening within me, desperate to speak the truth. It was a struggle that echoed the larger spiritual war waging around us, a conflict where too many chose conformity over authenticity. To shield my new beliefs from those who would judge and condemn me, I learned to wear a mask. I returned to my duties as a surgeon, but the procedure felt mechanical, each cut and suture lacking the passion they once held. As I navigated through the motions, the desire to shout my newfound truth was stifled, trapped beneath layers of fear. I began to question everything I had believed to be true about my faith. It was unsettling, the feeling that I was betraying an essential part of myself, yet embracing the new calling within me seemed just as complex. I kept my struggles bottled up, floating through a sea of silent despair, yearning for connection, but pushed away by a tidal wave of misunderstanding. In the quiet moments at home, I often revisited my encounter with Jesus, replaying every detail in my mind as though it were my only lifeline. Those moments, in that ethereal realm, had ignited a passion within me that yearned to shine, a desire to awaken others from their slumber of deception. Each vision I had witnessed was a thread woven into the tapestry of human experience, reminding me that we were all interconnected within a common struggle against manipulation and division. But could I truly find the strength to share such truths? What if speaking out meant losing even those who were closest to me? These thoughts spiraled within me like a storm, amplifying the fear that clung to my spirit. Yet I felt a growing urgency, a deep compulsion that pulled me toward action. I recognized that every moment spent in silence was a moment wasted, a chance to enlighten others, lost to the very deceptions I once embraced. While the fear of rejection loomed large, I grasped the profound weight of my responsibilities. Jesus had not just called me, he had entrusted me with a revelation that could change lives. The realization sunk in that remaining quiet would mean standing still amidst a world hungry for the truth. I had witnessed how division fueled our struggles, how both societal and personal battles continued to rage, yet here I stood, ready to set out on a path that could ignite an awakening. As I prepared to confront this new reality, I felt the rush of fear and anticipation merge into a singular purpose. I knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but the desire to liberate others from the chains of deception outweighed the threat of isolation. In those moments of quiet reflection, the pain of loneliness transformed into a beacon of hope. I resolved to take the first step, to speak out, to share my story and my truth. What awaited me on this new path remained shrouded in uncertainty, yet the light of revelation that Jesus had shared with me burned brightly, guiding me toward whatever might come next. The awakening had begun, and I was finally ready to embrace it. In the stillness of the night, beneath the weight of constant scrutiny, I discovered a sanctuary, a hidden corner of my world, where I could explore my growing doubts and truths without fear. Each evening after the hospital quieted down, I would retreat to my room, the only sound being the soft rustle of paper as I delved into the Bible. The words spoke to me not merely as ancient text, but as a lifeline reaching out from a time when faith was personal and pure. I found solace in the stories of Jesus, his teachings resonating deep within me, speaking of love, redemption, and a truth that felt so different from what I'd been taught. As I watched videos and joined online discussions, I encountered fellow former Muslims who shared similar stories of awakening. We were united by our experiences, conversations flowing freely about the hidden agendas we had been exposed to, revealing how the elite manipulate our beliefs for their agenda. These connections were like balm for my weary soul, offering understanding and acceptance that I felt I could not find in my everyday life. Each exchange filled me with hope, creating a network of support that helped reinforce my resolve to pursue a path that felt increasingly dangerous, yet necessary. But as my faith began to deepen, so did my longing for a personal connection to Jesus. I began to attempt heartfelt prayers, often falling silent mid-sentence, overwhelmed by the enormity of the task. I'd sit there, enveloped in darkness, yearning for a flicker of light to illuminate my path, asking for guidance and courage in the face of societal pressure looming over me. In those moments, I felt both liberated and terrified. The very act of praying felt revolutionary. And yet I worried about the consequences if anyone were to discover my search for a new faith. My longing for baptism grew stronger each day. It symbolized not just a personal commitment to the truth I had found, but a profound act of defiance against the forces that sought to keep me shackled. The thought of publicly embracing my new beliefs filled me with both excitement and fear. Would my family understand? Would my colleagues turn their backs on me, leaving me isolated and alone? Each time I contemplated taking that step, I felt a rush of anxiety coupled with an undeniable yearning for transformation, a battle played out in my heart that echoed the larger spiritual war happening around me. Despite the turmoil, the moments of connection with those who understood my struggle made me feel alive and hopeful. I clung to the faith that this awakening was leading me somewhere significant. The truths I was unearthing painted a vivid picture of a world deeply divided yet yearning for unity. As I silently vowed to become a part of the change, each prayer was a step closer to transformation, igniting the dormant fire within me as I prepared to step boldly into the light. I could sense that the journey ahead would demand courage and resilience, but the conviction thrumming through my veins told me I was on the right path, ready for the challenges that lay just beyond the horizon. The moment for revelation was approaching, and I couldn't ignore the urgent call to voice my truth. In the quiet moments following my revelation, an overwhelming sense of purpose began to wash over me. I realized that what I had experienced during that fateful encounter with Jesus wasn't just about my own salvation. It was about something much larger. This was a call to action, a divine invitation to testify to the truth I had uncovered. I could no longer sit on the sidelines, silently grappling with my beliefs, while the world outside continued to spiral into chaos. The weight of that moment pressed into my soul, urging me to step into the light and share the profound insights that had been entrusted to me. Every day I was struck by the reality of the spiritual war being waged around us. The deceptions perpetrated by those in power, the elite who sought to keep us divided and fearful, became increasingly clear. They thrived off manipulation, feeding on the very conflicts and unrest that plagued our society. I felt as if I had been dusting off a window, finally able to see the world as it really was. The urgency of this awareness compelled me to break my silence, even knowing the risks involved. I started reaching out to a few trusted individuals, careful to select those who would be open to hear about my journey. We formed a small community, sharing our experiences and fears, each of us burdened by the same truth. Those who speak out against the hidden agendas of the powerful may find themselves ostracized or worse. But every meeting, every discussion, only solidified my resolve. I wasn't alone. My mission was shared, and together we fueled one another's desire to awaken the sleeping masses. In those intimate gatherings, we spoke of the many layers of deception lurking beneath the surface of our lives. We discussed how the impacts of technology and political stratagems often masked our collective need for spiritual connection and understanding. The more I shared, the clearer it became that staying silent was no longer an option. If I wanted to help others see the truth and engage in the awakening process, I needed to brave that first step into openness. The thought of proclaiming my faith and my understanding felt monumental, but it was a burden I was willing to bear. As I stood at the precipice of this decision, the potential consequences loomed large in my mind. I would have to confront my family, my colleagues, the very people who had once looked at me with admiration. Could I bear witness to the truth I had found while knowing it might cost me everything? I felt the weight of that decision settle heavily on my chest. Yet amidst the fear, there was a light flickering within me, a beacon driven by faith and the hope that others could rise from the darkness of deception just as I had. The moment for action was drawing near, and I felt the stirring of something powerful within my spirit, beckoning me forward to reclaim the truth and share it with a world that desperately needed to hear it. What awaited me on this journey remained uncertain, but the call could no longer be ignored. The decision to abandon my former life was not one I took lightly. I stood at the crossroads of my existence, torn between the life I had built, a life forged from years of hard work and dedication, and the profound revelations I had experienced. The voice of Jesus echoed within me, urging me to step into the light, to break free from the chains that had held me captive for so long. It was time to leave behind the sterile walls of the hospital, the expectations of my community, and the judgment of those who could not understand my spiritual awakening. With every passing day, the weight of my decision grew heavier, yet it was a burden I felt compelled to bear. I packed only the essentials, leaving behind my once beloved career as a surgeon. As I drove away, a mix of fear and excitement surged through me. My heart pounded as I entered a new city, a place where I hoped to find freedom in practicing my faith openly. I longed to evangelize, to share the truth I had unearthed about the hidden agendas that shaped our world. This was no longer just about me. It was about sowing hope and love wherever I could. I envisioned a community where fear and deception could be dismantled, where truth could flourish amidst the darkness. But the journey was not without its challenges. The pain of losing my family weighed heavily on my soul. They could not accept my new beliefs, and the rift between us felt insurmountable. As much as I poured myself into serving those in need, offering food, clothes, and compassion, I often found myself wrestling with loneliness. I missed my loved ones, the familiar warmth of family gatherings, and the feeling of acceptance that came from being part of their lives. Yet, I felt a growing sense of fulfillment as I connected with new friends who shared my journey of faith, each of us navigating our paths in this spiritual war, seeking to awaken others from the slumber cast by deception. As I became involved in my new Christian community, I discovered a sense of belonging I thought I had lost. We gathered to pray, share testimonies, and support one another in our missions to spread truth. The energy was infectious, igniting a fire within me to reach even further, to confront the forces that sought to keep people shackled in ignorance. I encountered individuals who had faced their own struggles, and together, we formed an unbreakable bond rooted in faith and purpose. Witnessing theirs, transformations fueled my own passion to carry forth the message of Jesus, to show others that they too could rise from the ashes of despair. Years passed, and while I thrived within this new community, thoughts of my family continued to linger in the corners of my mind. I cherished the hope that reconciliation might be possible, that one day they would understand the truth that had set me free. Perhaps they would see that my love for them had not waned. Rather, it had deepened through my experiences. I often prayed for their hearts to open, hoping to bridge the divide that had formed after my awakening. Yet, as I spoke to others about the importance of love and forgiveness, I felt the urgency to act on my own words, knowing that maintaining a path of compassion toward my family was essential to embodying the teachings of Jesus. With each step toward living out my purpose, I felt the burden of responsibility growing heavier. The world around me was still tainted by deception. The manipulation by those in power continued unabated. As I ventured out to spread the truth, I was aware of the danger I faced, knowing that speaking out against the elite's hidden agenda would undoubtedly invite scrutiny. Nevertheless, I was committed to shining a light on the darkness that surrounded us, advocating for unity and understanding amidst the chaos. My journey had transformed from a personal one to a collective mission, a calling to awaken others, challenge the narrative, and ignite hope within the hearts of those who had lost their way. As I moved forward, the tension surged within me, a mixture of fear and resolve, preparing me for the next chapter of my life. I understood that the fight for truth and spiritual awakening would not be easy, but my conviction propelled me onward. The legacy of my journey had only just begun, and I felt an undeniable strength surging within me, fueled by faith and the promise of what lay ahead. Now that you've walked with me through this journey, I must share a profound realization I've come to. Every life, including your own, is a thread in this magnificent tapestry of existence, a tapestry woven not just by our choices, but by a force far greater than any of us can comprehend. We're all part of a cosmic struggle, a spiritual war that underlies our daily lives. The truths we uncover are revolutions waiting to unfold, inviting each of us to awaken and reclaim our power. After that fateful night, I understood I am not merely a surgeon, but a messenger of hope, of absolute transformation calling out from the shadows. Jesus reached into my darkness and illuminated a path that leads not just to personal redemption, but to collective awakening. I invite you to reflect on your own life. Have you ever felt a stirring in your spirit, a whisper nudging you toward greater truths? What is holding you back from acknowledging it? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Each experience shared brings us closer to understanding the profound connections we offer one another. If this testimony ignited something within you, please don't leave without subscribing to Truth from Beyond and hitting the notification bell. Together, we can journey deeper into these spiritual revelations, exploring the mysteries that certainly beckon us all. Your engagement plays a critical role. It signals to the universe that you are ready to seek and to share truths that manifest liberation for all who listen. As we approach our next video, get ready to witness another staggering testament of transformation, one that echoes the essence of awakening, a journey that will fortify your understanding of the divine connection available to us all. I assure you, what lies ahead is filled with hope and revelation, an invitation to step fully into the light. I'm Amir, and I'm grateful to have journeyed with you today. Remember this: the quest for truth begins with courage, and it is in that courage that we are collectively empowered to change the world. Until next time, keep seeking, keep reflecting, and let the light guide you onward.